this on? Do I need to turn this on? It's on. Terrific. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dawn Finley. I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third annual Bob and Sherry Faust Distinguished Lecture. Today, we honor the legacy of a remarkable architect and educator, Robert L. Faust, while imagining new trajectories of design through the work of our distinguished guest, Tatiana Bilbao. I first want to extend a warm welcome to and thanks to Sherry Faust, Bob's dedicated spouse and partner, whose generosity and commitment to realizing their collective vision have made this event possible, and so much more. Thank you, Sherry. I also want to extend a welcome to Dan Bennett, our CADC Dean Emeritus, and his wife, Joan. Welcome. As well as our Interim Dean Emeritus, Karen Rogers. Welcome, Karen. And also someone I hope to get to know a little bit better in future is Melissa Denny, our former Director of Advancement, who really was instrumental in working with Sherry to put together and make this endowment a reality. So thank you all. So I'm going to give a brief introduction of Bob Faust, followed by that of Tatiana Bilbao. And I have to admit that the task of introducing not one, but two profoundly influential architects in under 10 minutes it feels like a daunting challenge, but I'm going to give it a go. As many of you know, Bob Faust arrived at Auburn University in the late 1960s, and he spent more than 40 years developing a career defined by a bold, hands-on approach to architecture that integrated teaching, professional practice, and construction, often working directly with his students to build the projects that he designed. His influence was rooted in an ethos of design build. This was a practice that he was exposed to in his collaborations with the architect Bruce Goff earlier in his career prior to Auburn, and things that he further developed throughout his time here in the city. His notable projects and works built here in the city, built in collaboration with enthusiastic students, some of whom I've met today and hope to meet more of you, really demonstrate his commitment to material exploration, meticulous craft, and the integration of construction and design. And his legacy really lives on through those who he mentored, he worked with, so many of you in this room today, through the archives of the drawings and projections, which we're so fortunate to have at Auburn University, and I had the distinct pleasure of viewing with Sherry and others today over at the library. Incredible collection of drawings that I hope that more students have the opportunity to see. And also, I think through this event, where we can gather and reflect upon contemporary ideas and modes of practice with exemplary invited guests. Which brings me to the now and the introduction of Tatiana Bilbao, who I hope most of you know and are aware of. She is an accomplished international architect whose work thoughtfully challenges architectural conventions and processes. She founded her practice, Tatiana Bilbao, a studio in Mexico City in 2004, focusing on integrating social values, collaboration, and innovative design across diverse contexts. I think you'll see in the projects that she presents today, from urban centers to rural communities, cultural institutions, to affordable housing. And her research-driven methods address the complexities of our built environment while seeking socially responsive, practical, and I would say evocative, beautiful solutions. Tatiana's practice continues to develop inventive approaches to housing, particularly through her social housing projects in Mexico, where millions of people lack access to affordable, safe, dignified shelter. And through intensive research and on-site engagement, she and her team propose modular, expandable homes that prioritize people, They prioritize flexibility, community integration, and they really empower residents to shape their own living spaces. And I think in this regard and in others, her approach aligns with Bob Faust's legacy and the ambitions of numerous CADC initiatives that advocate and advance innovative construction methods to benefit communities and to promote social equity. So beyond her practice, Tatiana is a dedicated educator at Yale currently, has been at schools worldwide, and I think this facet really creates a productive dialogue between practice and academia. I'm not going to list her accolades. They're all beautifully printed here, but she has been recognized widely, worldwide, and published extensively. Her projects are celebrated for their sensitivity to contemporary challenges, formal elegance, and innovative use of materials. So finally, I would say Tatiana's practice reminds us that architecture is not just about creating objects. It is about providing care, creating frameworks for inhabitation, and responding to critical social and environmental challenges. Her position and practice align in sensibility with Bob Faust's rigorous human-centered design legacy and emphasis on innovation. And Tatiana, we are truly honored to have you in Alabama at Auburn to share your insights and your vision.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you very much to the late Bob and the very present Sherry. Thank you for the honor that you have given me to give this distinguished lecture. I feel really humbled by the fact that I have to give these on this name because I see Bob's work that I started to know since I was invited as very much aligned with our values and really linked to the construction of a much kind of thorough and holistic form of looking at architecture. So I'm very honored to be here. I'm also very thankful to Ernesto, who we share last name, Bilbao. We have not found any family connection, but we hope we do very soon. And to Olivia, who have really, truly made possible that I'm here. I'm sure there are 1,000 more names behind that, but I really thank everybody and mostly all of you who are here to share this lecture today. I thought I wanted to put together kind of a lecture that will allow you to understand a little bit of the ethos in which we work and also kind of the projects in which we are working and a little bit how we go through the process of designing them, of thinking them, and then finally building them and inhabiting them. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. Eight years ago, I received a call from Pater Kilian, a Cistercian monk from the Abbey of Heiligenkreuz in Austria, asking me to help them to create a new foundation for the order in Germany. very soon after that call, I realized that this is not only going to be a lifetime project, because we're going to be working on this project till way past our lives. It's also a life-changing project. I realized that the monastery, it's really the ultimate domestic space. The whole kind of understanding of my work comes and it's rooted into the understanding that architecture provides a primary form of care. Therefore, I have really worked and dedicated everything I have, all my energy into understanding how to create platforms for anyone to develop their own lives. Domesticity has been at the center of our practice, with no doubt, but understanding that a domestic space is not only the place where we eat and sleep, it's also the place where we walk, where we leisure, where we talk, where we socialize, where we connect, where we produce. And it's basically the space where we live. I hope you noticed that I titled this lecture City of Rooms. I understood through my career that it's not only about those spaces that we are sheltered with and call our houses. It's we live 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it is everywhere. And the monastery, I found that it is really the ultimate domestic space for two main reasons. First of all, is a space that is totally surrendered and dedicated to hold bodies to exist. And that for me is the spaces we inhabit. And why? Because it really needs to hold those physical bodies autonomously to be able to perform the spiritual life. And of course, after this introduction, you might think that I'm going to try to convince you to become monks or that we should all live like that in monasteries. That's not the case. I just wanted to kind of give you the two most important learnings that I have had so far. I'm sure that there are going to be many more, but also many more important ones through my career designing this monastery. But the two ones that I've realized and I'm able now to put together to create a longer and everlasting understanding on architecture in many ways. So a monastery is designed pretty much the same. It has a very strict form because that derivates from the ritual that the monks are to perform. But as I say, very linked to the understanding of a structure that holds a body during the pass of the day and the pass of the year to exist on it, holding its primary functions, but also understanding its primary necessities. And you would say, yeah, that's every house that we encounter. Well, no, because I think that at the present we have kind of standardized the possibilities of existence and reduced it to its functions. But we don't live only because of we sleep and we eat just barely like that. We live because we perform rituals to perform all those things. And the most important thing that I understood in this, that of course in this type of monasteries is very specific because it holds a very specific ritual, which is a Cistercian, or for this that is performed by the Cistercian order, and is not for anybody else. And that is something that I recurrently kind of worked around in my career, understanding that we do have the same necessities as humans, but none of us live the way the other one does in any regard. Not even people from the same household understand inhabitation in this planet the same way. There are nuances, and those nuances are where architecture could support or could not support the way we live. So this project is really truly a subject for 3 or 4 lectures only. I'm going to reduce it to very few minutes because I wanted to just provide you the platform on which we kind of stand by because of this project. This monastery is going to be built in a forest in East Germany, very, very East Germany in Brandenburg. Brandenburg is a state that Berlin is the capital, and this is in the border with Poland. The monks found a very beautiful place there with a very charged history, and we are going to kind of we're going to build a new monastery there, a new foundations, with the purpose of kind of healing and construction from there on this spot. The monastery cannot challenge the way monasteries are done because the ritual that these monks perform is exactly the same that was described by Saint Benedict in the 6th century, and that was reinforced by Saint Bernard in the 11th century. So, of course, the task is not to reinvent the space at all, is to understand how to build a monastery in the 21st century. And, of course, the challenges are very, very large, are very big, but as I said, understanding that this space holds bodies to exist is one of the kind of the most important learnings of this process. The monastery understands that the monk needs to live this individual, intimate life to have this spiritual existence, but it understands that it is absolutely interconnected. So it understands the nature of humanity, which is its interconnectedness to the other, to hold a communitarian space, a collective space that can hold each individual together. So this exact kind of balance between individuality and collectiveness is very well curated in a building like this. It's very well said, and it performs inclusively according to that rhythms of humans existing in this planet, which is, oops, I'm sorry, I did a mess here. No problem, I think it's solved. Just the computer. The ritual is understanding also the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the year, and the linkness of the human life to that condition, environment condition of our planet that is our own ecosystem. So, and very interestingly, this is defined on the 11th century. They understood very well how to live in tune with its the interior condition of a human, but also the linkage to the planet. We have understood many things about it. One of the biggest challenges has been to understand how to not design rationally, but symbolically. Any single move of this project is decided by the proportions, the physical proportions, the geometry, the grade levels, the materiality, but all of it, it's done like that with much more symbolic decisions. We understood also very clearly that this is linked to the very center symbolism of the body, and how to link the body to everything, to the proportions, to the materiality, to the acoustics, has been a challenge because we are trained as architects to design in a very rational way, taking decisions very pragmatically on how to put a door and how to put a window according to factors, even responding just to codes. In this case, that nothing of that counts, everything relies in a symbolic way towards the ritual that is performed by each body in this space. So as I said, like kind of the two most important learnings, first of all, is the scales of relationships between the individual and the collective. A monk understands that the thing that holds the possibility of live this spiritual life is the body, and the body needs to be held. And the first layer of that holds that body is the robe. The robe is, of course, an identitarian thing, but most of all, it's a protective structure. It's the first protective skin. Then the next thing that holds that body is the cell. And the cell is the very important nucleus of the life of these monks, which is connected to the collectiveness through different scales of rooms and areas, and then possibilities of expression. So the cell is connected to the cloister. The cloister is the first place that the monks encounter their other brothers. Then that the cloister is connected to the more collective communal spaces of the monastery, which is the refectory, the chapter room, the library, etc. And then that's connected to the church, which then welcomes the community outdoors. And the monk transitioned through these spaces in a very ritualistic way, but also transitioned through them in this way. So the monk is never exposed from his intimate space towards the collectiveness, and this is something key. Although kind of the modern dedicated their life to understand what were the necessities of our bodies in order to translate them into a built environment and build houses, I think a lot of these things were disregarded. And I'm going to explain you more. We do all need to sleep, but we don't all do it the same way. We do all need to eat, but we don't only nurture our bodies with proteins and vitamins. Certainly those are very important, but we nurture ourselves from food that is cooked with flavors, with cultures, with histories, with care, with love, and that is really how we should eat. And those things never happen the same. They cannot happen the same for anybody and do not apply universally. So we've been trying, as I said, since very long to understand how to produce houses that create platforms for anyone to decide how to inhabit in them. Housing in Mexico is a human right. Not only is a human right, that's declared by the UN in 1946, but in Mexico was declared as a constitutional right even before in 1917. So every government has the mandate to produce houses that support the constitutional right, which is that it says that every citizen has the right to have a dignified and enjoyable place to live. The problem comes when that definition is translated into codes, and the codes are standardizing the way people live. In our country, there's 67 different cultures embedded in the whole territory. These 67 cultures, none of them live the same. I already mentioned that we, even sharing the same culture, don't inhabit the same way. Anybody. We don't have the same social arrangement. We don't have the same sensitivity to things. We don't sleep the same. We don't cook the same. We don't eat the same. No, none of us. But if you imagine that even you think of different cultures, then it even goes beyond. Nevertheless, the code applies and the law applies for everybody the same, and it doesn't recognize these things. So we were thinking, how can we create a strategy that is not a model house, because a model house cannot be applied and used by everybody the same way. It is a strategy that can be built by anyone in different conditions. Definitely, that's very hard, and it's not possible. We proved it with these design strategy that we created in 2015 that was built and applied in these houses in Acuña, where there was a tornado and 11 houses were destroyed. Some others were damaged, and where we built 20 of them around for people who were able to decide in which type of manner they would articulate the rooms. They would use the space with rooms or not rooms, with kitchens or not kitchens, with bathrooms or no bathrooms, and many different forms of also configuring the plot. We also kind of extended the strategy to really extend the possibilities of the private realm into the public realm. And but we proved that also kind of thinking, no, and materializing a space like that does not completely respond to hold a space. They do respond to hold people to be productive. So the house of today responds to a production mode. It really is even described by the law in Mexico, but everywhere else, to a foundation that responds much more to the production industry, that serves the market rather than the people. So if we think that the house of today is founded in 3 different fictions, we can understand that. And this is said very well by Fernanda Canales in the introduction of her book, My House, Your City, where she states that the modern house is based in 3 foundational fictions. The first one is that the house as a place of rest, as if work would disappear in the house, as if care work, which is the most important work we do, that is held in our houses, would not exist. As if it really holds a specific form of social arrangement, a mother and a father and 2 kids, as if no other forms of social coexistence exist in this planet, and if it doesn't even evolve, because if we think that the house of today, in the majority, the 95%, I would say, of the houses of today are holding this social structure because are designed for that, that only last a part of your life if you are one of those 18% that decide to live as a hetero couple with families, with children. This only lasts for, 15 years in your life, because then children grow and they left, or before that was not the house that worked for you. Anyway, so this house really serves also the market, because as when you think of it as a commodity, it really cannot hold anybody but the money it represents. So if this house of today is the model house for the city of production, as I call it, with what I said, I have been wondering, what is the house for the city of care? What is the house that really understands that the most important labor is done in this space? First of all, we need a shelter to exist, but it's not only, we've proven that it's not only a shelter on top of our heads that allows us to grow and to thrive. It is really a place that is able to inspire our life. And I use the word inspiration in a much broader word, in a much broader way, thinking on what is a place that allows, that is becoming a platform that provides us for the care, the physical necessary care for us to grow, but also the spiritual necessary care for us to be nurtured to grow. And this is something that we have as a question for every project behind on what we do. We have kind of gone further to understand if the platform that everybody needs to exist can be something that is decided by the person who inhabits. This was the question for this project in Paris, which is currently going on. Paris kind of set a goal to create a different type of built environment for the year 2030, and it launched a series of competitions around this topic. We won this to create 3 buildings around the peripheric in Port de Montreal. And what these buildings are about is that buildings that don't understand themselves as housing or productive space or offices, because that might be the way we live and classify spaces today, but these buildings overlast centuries and should last centuries. So how can they acquire new uses? How can they acquire new forms of living? How can they really promote and provide possibilities for anyone to decide how to inhabit? So they're not defined as offices or as productive spaces or as housing. Is defined as just spaces to be built in also including to be carbon zero and many other things. But I think that the interesting idea is to start understanding, no, that also is not about how we build today for supporting the lives that we live today, but also how these can evolve with our lives that evolve every single second on us. We have been able to kind of experiment, and I don't say that in a bad word, because obviously people inhabit here, so it's not an experiment, but to test or to provoke these kind of questions with many different types of living spaces that we've done. So it is also beautiful private luxury spaces that we are able to think more broadly, know what it means of hierarchy, what means the relationship to the exterior, to other species, what means what it means to challenge the notion of a kitchen, for example, what it means also to reinforce notions of kitchens without understanding them correctly. So, for example, in this case, we decided to break the idea of a static kitchen. First of all, to think that you could use the kitchen as a piece of furniture, meaning that you could move it around in your house and not necessarily fix it to a room. But more importantly, you could really even eliminate the possibility of the kitchen, challenging notions of labor, of discrimination to people towards there, realizing that we had just done houses that just reinforce that, no? So this kitchen that we built in a house in the lake of Chapala, which is in Jalisco, in the state of Jalisco, is a central kind of west state in the country, is the state that holds as capital Guadalajara. You might know Guadalajara. So in this house, what we did is we started to follow the ideas of the owner, and we built and designed this kitchen, which not only reinforces kind of gender roles, but also kills the possibility of us to be nurtured by food. In Mexico, we cook in different regions. It's obviously the food is very, very different, but normally it's very spicy, and it takes days to be cooked. This stove does not serve for our food. We cannot even heat tortillas. Tortillas is the bread for Mexicans. In this stove, we cannot cook a mole. In this kitchen, forget about it. You will smell the chile for the rest of your life in your whole house if you cook something like that in this kitchen. So we are reinforcing acts of society that are discriminating cultures, genders, and we never realized that until we had really to make a hard analysis. We're also kind of reinforcing social roles by following the code in Mexico, which is a house is not complete if it doesn't have a larger room for a double bed and a smaller room for two kids. If they're different genders, they need to be separated, so then you need a third bed. So when I understood that, I really started to think, why do we have kind of this condition that imposes the same form of living to every human being in this planet? It's not only architecture that is reinforcing that, of course. It's media, it's society's codes, it's economics, it's politics, it's many, many, many things. If you ask anyone in the world today, from a kid in Sri Lanka to a person in North Dakota, to ask to design a house or to draw their house, the drawing would be pretty much similar. So I started thinking, what is the role of the house? What is the incidence and the recurrence of doing this model doing to our society, shaping our future, and how can we think differently? And this really started when we worked for the for the earthquake, the reconstruction of the earthquake in Mexico City. Well, it happened in Mexico City, but also it hit 3 states of the south west of Mexico. And these 3 states lost like 500,000 homes, mostly because they were badly built. That's also a subject for 3 other lectures. I'm not going to go into it, why they fell. But we decided to help in a little town called San Simon. And we built with the community, we rebuilt with the community their houses. We decided very deliberately, not decided, we accepted very deliberately that we knew nothing on how these people inhabited, and that we were only there to provide technical assistance on things we did knew. For example, to how to use materials together to provide structural security, and not anything else, not culturally, socially, programmatically define anything. We let the people design that. And there is when we understood that for them, kitchens are not places inside their homes. Kitchens are collective spaces, because collectives cook, collectives provide the food for the community, and it's not done by one, but by many in different periods or the same periods. We also learned that not everybody uses a stove to cook, and that actually if you use a stove, you cannot cook the majority of the things that these people need to cook. And we also understood that the social configuration, it's very dependable on each of the singular social units that exist in the community, and that the majority of them do not share that. So what we did after was to really understand that, and understand what could be structures that could perform that way. So what we did is we started doing different strategies. I mean, these we were asked by the Infonavit, which is the main sponsor of housing in Mexico, how to think of a structure that is not defining a way of living, but rather allowing for many things to happen. So these are modules that can be used for different ways, for different things. So the 3 can perform as a house, and if in the center you put a roof, then you have dining space or a social space. Each of the modules could be used, one for a kitchen, one for a bathroom, the other one for rooms, but also they could be used for different social or generations or people to be used. So each module for one person. I don't know, they have many ways, and probably many things that I cannot imagine, that also can be arranged differently, so they can perform very differently on how they relate to the exterior, how they relate to the interior, how they relate in between them, and then how would they kind of be promoting a different type of block, a different type of society for sure, that really understands its relationships and determinations very differently on what we see today. Unfortunately, this house was only built in one location. It is a laboratory of houses. It's called Apan, the town, and this is there were 32 architects asked to design a house and to build it here. But ours is not a house, it's a system. So being placed as a house really does not allow this system to perform as we imagine. So these are the moments where we are confronted to the way of thinking that we are not architects, because we're not doing those things. And in many regards, we are always questioning ourselves, because our buildings is not about the object in the landscape. It's not about how the structure looks. It's about how it can be used. It's about how it can perform. It's about how it holds the stories that there are produced to produce this architecture, but also the stories that are being created by the architecture. I think that we as architects tend to think that the urbanists are the one who define the city. But if you think that the way you put a fence or a wall towards the collective space is the way you're defining the city, the way you're defining the relationship of that structure towards the city. And that if you think that every of the single of those structures, the sum of all those structures is creating the city, then we are creating the city. So we have to think, even if we design an interior room, the relationship of the bed towards the door, towards the hallway, towards the exterior, is the way this human is going to experience its relationship towards the collective. So we are building the city. So we are thinking, since the first minimal structure that we design, how this is going to impact the production of the city, because the sum of that infinite forms of expressions in the physical realm, it is making the city. In 2017, we were asked to design a house in Spain, in the outskirts of Barcelona, in between Zaragoza and Aragon and Catalonia. And the whole premise of the project was that we had to design a house for someone that we didn't knew, and that we were not going to imagine who it was going to be. And that was the premise of the project. The person behind thought that the architects never had the freedom of designing something without a program or without necessities of a client. And at the beginning, I thought it was very strange. But then I thought, well, honestly, this is always the case. We don't know the other person. We cannot know the other person that inhabits here. We cannot know their necessities. We can listen to them. We can, of course, talk, have a conversation, but we always will have our own precepts into these their designs, rather than their own necessities really embedded there. So we thought, well, this is a very big opportunity to think of a house that is going to be used in the way that the person that comes later will decide how to use it. So what we decided is to eliminate every notion of program, of diagram, of relationships, and to just like kind of design the space, because that's something you cannot liberate off. Every action, every spatial action has a design decision behind. So we decided to embrace that and just leave everything else out. And what we did is we decided to take a square and then create different definitions of that square with different aesthetical conditions, but also with different scales, and then repeat it in the landscape. And then think that these structures could be inhabited in many different ways, as you can imagine. And then we were asked for the plans for these, to deliver to the municipality. And then we thought, okay, if we do plans, we're going to have to embed the program and the way these structures need to be used. So here, and we had done it before, but we never so consciously, we started to really understand that also the way we draw architectural plans are determining how people live. They're directing how people use the spaces. I mean, there's even people that go back to the plans and hang the frame, the paintings, or put the couches the way the architect put them in the plan. So we thought, okay, let's challenge that. And we did these drawings that, I mean, you cannot see them. They're done in butter paper, and they can be folded, so they can also become models. So they're plans and sections and models at the same time. And they're challenging what is happening in this space, so nobody can imagine. The municipality accepted these plans, but then they asked for images. So we were like, okay, then images go beyond determination. No? They really say how and what a space should be, and we thought, well, we're not going to challenge the way we draw and what way we do images in 3 days that we have to deliver this. So we just asked Gonzalo, a person who was working with us at that time. Gonzalo, imagine this is your house. How would you inhabit it? So this is the house that Gonzalo would live in, and not the house we designed. And finally, we delivered it. The house has not been built. We don't know when it's going to be built, but maybe someday. Then we were asked pretty much at the same time. There was a brief that asked us for design of a house that would kind of provide new ways, the provide a space for the new forms of living. And the new forms of living in this house was described as working and living in the same space. As I just briefly described before, for me, the house is the foremost important place of work. So new ways of living, working and living in the same space for me sounded kind of weird, because I think that humanity has worked for the most important job, which is reproductive labor, since the start of humanity, in their same living spaces. But not only that, also productively, we work in the same places we live. I mean, the majority of the rural life works like this. You work and live in the same space. Farms are that, but also kind of everywhere else we do that. Probably in the cities, and more recently, that has been tried to be eliminated, but the reproductive work never goes away. So I think that for me, it was not new ways of life, was ways of life in which we had to design. Then also this house had kind of a request of the architects to provide a house that has a room and a bathroom and a living room and a bathroom and a kitchen and two bedrooms and one working space, so 6 spaces. And we decided to challenge everything. So what we did is we're going to design for the ways of life, having spaces that promote different types of activities and emotions according to the sizes, the proportions, the orientations. So we decided to design 6 different spaces in this house. We described the spaces with words. And then for this was the first time that we decided to challenge also the way we arrived to design those spaces, and was through collage. We do collages to represent our work. We do collages to challenge the conversations that we kind of do with the processes. And this was the first time we used collage to design. Why collage? Because collage is an image that is yet to be interpreted. And it's to be interpreted by the one who views it. So if I ask everybody what they see in this image, everybody would say something different. And if I ask you to use one word, it would be even more weird, because nobody would say the same word. And this is the way I think that the image includes you. So this image, it's including you. It's also a non-finished image. It can also be, it can also be kind of added or subtracted in many ways. So we thought maybe using it and experimenting to do to design a house with these precepts, we could then arrive to a different idea. We then did 6 collages for each of the rooms. It was already very hard to agree on the images that were going to be used to describe each word. I have to say that I'm very sorry that I have not the citation of the images, but I know exactly which ones are all of them. I'm very sorry. And then when we did the 6 collages, we really then said, okay, now from here, how we're going to design a house. The house, then we had to deliver, so we did one single drawing and kind of trace all the collages. From there, we had to do a house, and we were like, okay, now what? We started making a volume out of it, and then we finally came with a result that I would say it was pretty disappointing, because I thought we could have arrived to the same design, just doing the same kind of architectural traditional forms of designing spaces, starting with the idea of a programmatic decision of volumizing spaces like rooms and kitchens and these things. So, but we had to deliver. We delivered the project, and then I thought this also was going to be just an experimental project. But a year after, we get a call from a family saying we want to build this house because it really responds to our way of life. And I was like very surprised. How is your way of life? I understood very clearly that they, when we endeavored in this call, they really interpreted the way to inhabit this house in their own very way. I would have never imagined to use the room where I thought it was the most public space for a sleeping room. I would never had imagined the room that I imagined to be my bathroom to be a kitchen. And they did. And then I thought, well, we did something. This house is under construction. These photos are from last winter. I don't have the latest ones, but we'll see what happens afterwards. I'm going to go fast to arrive to the end project, but I wanted to kind of go through this project in St. Louis, Missouri, where we were asked to design a block. And as I was saying before, I was thinking how to think of these houses with 22 houses, so a block with 22 houses, single individual houses, how to think of these houses with rooms that would create a different possibility of neighborhood. So what we did is we kind of placed all the houses interweaved into spaces that are shared, rather individually, communally, or collectively, or even publicly, rather than just to the street. Those houses are confronted with different little programs that are shared by either the collective, the communality, or the individuals, like this pool, or like this public park that is also embedded in the block, or more common spaces shared by less people, but also in the exterior, or individual spaces in the exterior, or spaces that are shared by different species, or like a productive garden or a playground. And in this way, to kind of masterize the idea of understanding how to create a different neighborhood from the house to the city. And we did we invited 3 other firms, so Macías Peredo from Guadalajara, Moss from New York, and Productora from Mexico and New York, to design 3 other houses. Then these 4 models of houses are multiplied and then built in the whole block. Our house kind of promotes this idea of having a very private space on top, opening to intimate spaces, but also a more public place on the bottom that opens to the collective. So kind of reinforcing the idea of the whole kind of master plan within it. And that's how kind of the houses are orchestrated between themselves. These houses have been built, 18 of them have been built, 14 of them are inhabited, and the rest are yet to come. And this is the house we designed. This is the house by Macías Peredo, and here you see both the Productora house in the front and the Moss house in the back. We're thinking how to orchestrate these ideas also in more collective environments, and not only housing. This is a project in Monterrey where 150 units are kind of put together in many different ways to create a possibility of a communitary living, the same way as in St. Louis, with spaces that are dedicated to other than just intimate spaces of inhabiting. I'm not going to stop on it. This building is under construction in Monterrey, in the city, the second largest city of Mexico in the north of the country. And this way we are also trying to think on flexible forms of living. I'm not going to stop on this project. I'm going to go very quickly to the end, because we are trying to think on the ethos of how to include the notions of understanding the privacy, the intimacy towards the collective. We did an intervention in a public space in Culiacán. Culiacán is a city in the north state west of Sinaloa. Is the capital of that state. And what we did here is to understand that the botanical garden, which it's kind of the ruler of this place because it's the nature that is here, is the one that is holding these structures together for us to be able to interact with it. So with this ethos, we designed a series of buildings, little pavilions that insert themselves as these protective shells for humans to perform their acts, but understanding that what rules here is the nature around. So how these buildings perform around nature for us is very important. How they are understanding that nature is what is architecture held in and held life of, and how the relationship between these two things evolve. The relationship between a very static condition, which is architecture, a very determinant one, a one that dominates and determines the place and the spot on how it should be used, but that holds an ever-changing process, which is life. It's held on an ever-changing process, which is the ground, and held a very ever-changing process that is life. So what that what that relationship means is very important to us, which will bring me to the last project. I'm very sorry I have to keep all these because I ran out of time. Going to the last project is kind of bringing all that together, how a building really provides the possibility for us to understand that we belong to this ecosystem that holds the earth together, that holds us in it, and how we can interact with it. So after working in the botanical garden, we were called to work in this central park of Mazatlan. Mazatlan is the second largest city in the state of Sinaloa, the same state. And Mazatlan has a very long history of being a tourist city, really all living from the sea. The seaside is very beautiful, it's the Sea of Cortez, and it really has a very natural, very interesting condition, which includes a natural regulating lagoon that whole kind of runs through the line of the shore, and the city was able to hold kind of secure this place to be called a park. But it has never been really consolidated to be an urban social space, so we were asked to do that. So of course, after thinking on the whole like kind of hydrological and environmental system of the city, we were thinking how to then think of a social use here. So we understood that the condition, the natural condition, was very interesting to be used as the also kind of the social environment that we wanted to create there. And what we did is to understand that there's three conditions. One, that it's the places that are always flooded by the water. Spaces that are flooded and dried, depending on the day of the year, and spaces that are only dry. And this image, it's very representative of that because this space has the three conditions, but also kind of understanding that this really can create a possibility for us to understand the evolution of life through cycles of the year, that it's more clear when you have a more extreme weather, but it's not that clear when you have a weather like in Mazatlan, which is they call it's only hell because it's always very hot. So how these people can also be exposed to the idea of that kind of cycle of life. When we started really intervening in the site, the first thing we had to do is regenerate the whole lagoon, because all these buildings that you see on the front where the sewage was thrown into this lagoon. So we had to recuperate the ecosystem by, of course, redirecting the sewage first. And then we were kind of starting to do even the social spaces, the promenades, etc. And we were doing that, and people understood how we were kind of articulating all of the things that were happening here, the environmental conditions, the ecosystem that holds us together, the humans, but also architecture. We were asked then to move forward as to build and design the aquarium. When we were asked to design the park, we knew that there were going to come two very big pieces of infrastructure, an aquarium and a museum, not designed by us. And when we knew they had projects, they have architectural conceptual projects, both of them. But when we were working here, the people behind said, well, the aquarium we have designed doesn't look like an aquarium. Could you design an aquarium for us? And I said, well, you know what? I have very serious problems with aquariums because those places are, for me, exactly what this mural represents. This mural is called The Man Controller of the Universe. It was painted first in 1933 by Diego Rivera in the Rockefeller Center in New York, later erased by the Rockefeller family who didn't like it, and then repainted in 1934 in the Palace of Fine Arts in Mexico City. And it's representing a man controlling the universe. I mean, it's very pretty descriptive. And I think that aquariums are exactly that, no? It's these places that we humans cannot go and just, the world that it's underworld, under the sea, we cannot just go and look at it. So why not bring it to us? No, it's the perfect description of how the man thinks is the controller of the universe. We even think we're destroying nature, or we are able to not destroy nature. I do think nature is not going anywhere. I think nature is expelling us because we have been very bad key parts of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is kicking us out. It already kicked out a species. The dinosaurs went away. So the planet is not going anywhere. It's not dying. The only ones we are dying is us if we don't understand how to get in tune with the ecosystem. So I said, well, those are my hesitations, but also the biggest one, like very direct line and pragmatic one, is that you are willing to build a space for an aquarium to fantasize with penguins in Mazatlan, which is 35 degrees average year-round. I mean, you have the Sea of Cortez 100 meters from there, which is the most interesting and important natural aquarium of the world. And you want to build 100 meters later a place that holds, I don't know, and that cages species that don't belong here. And they said, exactly, that's our thing. We want first... That's our thing that we don't want, sorry. We want first a building that becomes an identitarian spot for our own ecosystem. So we want a building that allows this society of Mazatlan to understand that we are spotted in the door of the Sea of Cortez, one of the most important aquariums, natural aquariums of the world. And we want a building to hold that, all those things together. Whew. I thought then the challenge is even larger than just building an aquarium. I thought, oh, I got myself into a bigger problem here. But then I thought, well, we're talking business. If you're really thinking of these as a place that links you, the society, the people of Mazatlan, with your surroundings socially, culturally, politically, ecologically, then we're talking about a different story. And then I said, well, we needed different experts. So I was able to bring into the team to design this institution to Oceanwise, which is the institution that holds the kind of a very beautiful organization that had the Vancouver Aquarium, doing a lot of what this institution wanted to do, protecting the seas of British Columbia, but also creating this relationship between the human inhabitation and urban areas of British Columbia towards its nature surrounding, so especially under the sea. So we brought them, they designed this institution in full, and then we had to design a building, which we had no tools to, because there's not such a building ever. So we thought that it was impossible. So instead of designing a building, we imagined a narrative. So we designed a narrative in which we arrived in the year 2289 to a building that was built in 2023. It was flooded because the sea rose in 2100. That's the only thing we knew. Then the sea receded in the year 2200, more or less. But the life that had really taken over this building had remained. And we found that the habitat that they created was a very beautiful space that only needed 2 very big stairwells to bring you up to understand what was the life that was implanted in the rooftop of this building, and to bring you down to understand what had happened in the rest of the building. And literally the building was designed with that narrative. This building is now up for as a finalist for the MCHAP award of this year. And the jury came to the building and really asked, what is the system, architecturally speaking, that drive the design of this building? And I kept saying, there was a building that was designed in the year 2023. We don't know why. And they really were asking, is this walls? Is this a system of, is this a sectional system? Is this a grid? Is this what? And I kept saying, no, it's not a system, blah, 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 until Ernesto, who's the person behind this aquarium, told them, you didn't listen? We don't know how this building was designed. We don't know who built it. We just arrived here and opened doors for you to visit it. So exactly that is how this building was kind of designed. It is really designed to promote life, to take over the building. It was built in the year 2023. It was open its doors in May of that year, so it's almost 2 years that it has been opened. And since then, 1.5 million humans have visited. We have not outnumbered that number with other species, but they're starting to be installed not installed, to arrive. We have systems that promote every other species that is around to nest there, to arrive, to land, to live, hopefully, in this place. So I hope at the year 2289, which I'm going to be there, I don't know you, if you want to come, you're welcome. There are even more than 1.5 million species inhabiting this space. And with this, I think I'm going to close this lecture, and I hope we have this time for questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for that very inspiring lecture. Before we switch to the moderated Q&A with questions submitted by the students, I also want the audience to please give Tatiana another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So the questions that I have for you, I mean, they were submitted by the students in the last couple of days, and I'm going to ask those questions according in the order of how we received them. So the first question comes from a third-year student, which is he's asking, or she, how do you overcome the difficulties that arise when working with a team comprised of people from a variety of cultures? Do you ever feel like a cultural translator when working with such a large range of clients and peers?
This is such a good question because I didn't get to say anything about it. As I think it's very important that every space is designed to create platforms for anybody else to inhabit it. I think that including all these kind of cultural differences provides a possibility to create platforms for larger people to be included on those designs. So I don't translate anything. I really include everything, I hope. And that's why we use collages, because collages are allowing to have those cultural differences embedded on them. But also, as I said, we think to represent our architecture with collages, we think to provoke conversation with collages, we design with collages, but we hope that our buildings are collages. So are spaces that have many different definitions, but mostly many different possibilities of inhabitation and use.
Great, thank you. We have another question from another third-year student. This student is asking, contemporary architects are challenged with identity. We act as designers, builders, engineers, artists, philosophers, scientists, historians, entrepreneurs, and many more. Of these identities, which do you most associate yourself with? How have your predecessors contributed to this identity? And how does this then influence your work?
I mean, this is a question, again, to do a lecture with. I'm going to try to answer with very few words, but I also think it's a very good question. I think that as the contemporary moment in architecture is challenging the definition of the architect, it is because the definition of the architect is a bit, for me, how to call it, naive. First of all, all of us humans inhabit this planet. We all have the necessity to have a protective shelf on top of our heads, which I already described, it not only a shell, it needs to be a more complex space that inspires our lives. We all know how to inhabit this place, and we should all be building it, right? So if we consider ourselves as just part of that kind of system of production of space, we would become much better enablers of that. than rather thinking that we have all the knowledge and the capacities and the possibilities, but also the right to design anything for anybody else to inhabit it, no? So if we think ourselves as kind of the enabler of the conversations that produce space, or even not only the enabler, but the one of the parts of it, we will integrally build better futures for sure.
Interesting, thank you, Tatiana. So this question is quite interesting because you cover a lot of projects that are about housing, right, and houses. So this question comes from a second-year student. I'm guessing this is coming from second-year students because students in second year are working on this housing project. So it's interesting. So this student is asking, when looking at affordable housing, what do you prioritize in the design process in order to make this housing affordable? I think it's kind of a tricky question, right? I mean, based on what you explained to us.
Yeah, but I have a very straightforward answer. I prioritize people living. And that's very important because I think we often are driven to prioritize costs, light, ventilation, form, whatever. And that's reduced, that diminishes the possibility of people to inhabit it. So if you hold into the possibility of people to inhabit and never let it down, you have to obviously arrive to the costs, to the possibility of building, to fulfill the codes, et cetera, but if you always hold to the notion that people are going to inhabit this place, I think you're able to perform much better.
Interesting, thank you. So another question that is, this is coming from a fourth-year student. This is a very specific question about a project that you mentioned, but happens in all the projects that you explained to us, in which in the majority of these, you blend architecture with nature, right, with landscape in a very fluid way. In particular, in this project, for example, the Botanical Garden in Culiacan, which is very similar to the one that you showed us last, right, in terms of nature and architecture. So what role do you believe public architecture should play in environmental awareness?
I mean, I think it's absolutely key. Architecture is the mediator and should be used as mediator, and I think this word is very key, between our own ecosystem and us to be able to inhabit in it, okay? So we need these structures to inhabit for many reasons. So it's a very pragmatic one of a physical thing that I've described, but also much more philosophically, we also need this, we need architecture to live in this planet, no? So, but we have used it for the sake of safety or sanity or hygiene or whatever as a limit between us and our own ecosystem, no? So we created walls and windows to protect us from the weather, but also to allow light to come in. But then we also created air conditioning to kind of avoid the exposure of the temperature, to a point that we are using architecture to really kind of allowing us to be expelled from this planet, no? To really disassociate from our own environment. There are bodies that exist, especially, I would say, and it's not trying to insult anybody, but that are living in this country at 22 degrees, which is 72 degrees Fahrenheit. They're year-round and their life complete, no? So the hospital is at 72 degrees, the car is at 72 degrees, the house is at 72 degrees, the house is, regardless if outside is minus 40 or plus 120, no? And these bodies are starting to be disassociated from the ecosystem. So as soon as you're exposed to the weather, you're sick, no? As soon as you are kind of exposed to the sun, you are sunburned, no? And these things are really what architecture is limiting, our possibility to be related and be part of our ecosystem. So I think, therefore, architecture should be understood as a medium. And this would really completely change the notion of that relationship if we understand it clearly. I'm not saying we should live in the wilderness with minus 40 degrees, no? But I think there is, if we use it as a medium and not as a limit, then there is a completely different range that happens in between and how architecture should be exposed. And that's what we're trying to do in these projects, no, especially in the botanical garden. No, it's understanding that there are some activities. I mean, Culiacan also has one season, hell, 35 degrees year round. No, I mean, I'm exaggerating. There's a winter, very reduced winter, but you need to control the temperature to be able to read, to study in this library, no, into a very specific degree. But on the other hand, you are part of this ecosystem. So how those buildings are exposed and how the relationship that are creating is exactly what I'm referring to when I say a medium, no? That becomes the possibility for you to inhabit this place, in Culiacan, to read in this library, no? But that also allows you to relate to this ecosystem that is understood as the one who rules the place.
This is a follow-up question, also related to some of the projects that you showed us. So in your practice, you often collaborate with local communities, right? I mean, you showed us some examples that are very precise on that regard. So how do you ensure their voices are not only heard, but meaningfully embedded into the final design?
That's a very broad question. Again, another question to create a whole lecture on it. Because, I mean, for me, I started my practice thinking, I'm not designed for the other. I not only design with the other, I design becoming the other, no? And that would allow me to think that their voices were there. But obviously that's very naive, again, a statement, because you cannot become the other in any regard, ever, no? The possibility of alterity is not, that is not available to us. So then I understood, is that not available? What then is a platform that voice is able to be represented there in the space and be able to inhabit it in their own way, with their own form, with their own voice? That's a question I always do. I always have. I don't have the answer, but we're trying to experiment with the strategies that I mentioned before, no? Eliminating determinations of architecture. Architecture determines by definition, but how you can eliminate cultural, political, social determinations and just allow the physical to be taken and determined by the one who uses it. It's one experiment or one line of research, but also the possibility of building with the community, no? Like in San Simon, which is not always possible, but when it's possible, it's that. By creating workshops, which I had to skip on the lecture, and creating conversations around, by doing collages, by building collages, by working with collages to create conversations. I mean, there are many strategies, but that's the search always, no?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, in other words, you can say that these buildings have been built by the community or in conjunction with the community, right? Which is something that is very opposed to the idea of this architecture, right? I mean, this is another question that we've received. So you've been spoken, I mean, not only in this lecture, through this lecture, but before, about resisting the idea of this architecture, right? So how do you balance having a recognizable design language while allowing each project to grow from its own context and needs?
I mean, for me, the definition of star architect is of that kind of person that believes that has the right and the possibility and the capacity to design for anybody else, no? I don't think I have it, as I said, and I don't think I have the right, nor the capacity, nor the possibility, and I don't think I do that. So I think that's the difference, and I think that is why every project, every process, every building that we have done is different, because we let the process be built, no? And that's what we do. We build processes. We don't build objects in landscape. So for me, that's exactly the difference, and that's how we live it. Let it live like that.
Nice. And then the last question, because we're kind of running out of time, comes from a fifth-year student. So this student is thinking about her future, maybe. So what should be the primary focus of architectural design in the next decade to address emerging challenges and opportunities?
I think that the deepest challenge is how to think of architecture to serve the care of humans instead of the care of capital and production? How can we understand buildings to hold bodies, to exist in this planet? And I think that if we think that, we definitely have to thinking in conjunction of the whole ecosystem, no? So for me, starting to think on how to care, it's to care first on ourselves, then on ourselves being interconnected to the other, so to the other, and then to the ecosystem, because otherwise we don't exist. So I think that the major challenge is to change the focus, no, into understanding that this serves the production society that we live in, that serves our bodies to exist in this planet.
Well, thank you so much for these very, very provocative answers, really, I mean, equally as the lecture. So before we conclude, we would like to thank the people that have made this lecture possible. So, and special thanks goes to Sherry Faust, of course. Thank you, Sherry, for really making this possible. Without your help and support, we wouldn't have it. Thank you, of course, yes. Yes, thank you, Sherry, so much. We also want to thank Tatiana, of course, for taking the time to come. Tatiana, knowing your busy schedule, you've been traveling all over the world all the time. On top of that, you teach at Yale, so we really appreciate your time, and we're very grateful. I mean, for you to come here.
Thank you.
And special thanks also goes to our Dean, Don Finley. Thank you so much, Don, for all the help and support. Another to our APLAS department head, Justin Miller. I don't know where he is sitting, but thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
Special thanks also to our CADC's advancement team. Also, they work a lot, very, very hard, I mean, to make this lecture possible. And also a special thanks to Olivia, Hannah, and Angela. Without their hard work, I mean, this lecture, of course, wouldn't have been possible. Their work is fundamental to put together this lecture. And I also would like to thank everybody who has come to this lecture, students, faculty, and public in general. Including Tatiana's relatives who have come from Birmingham, War Eagle, right? I mean, Tatiana's cousins went to Auburn. That was a very amazing surprise and coincidence. And finally, don't forget that we have a reception following up, and we also have some boards of Tatiana's work displayed here next to where we are right now. And so with this, we conclude this lecture. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Gracias, Ernesto. Thank you.